You can use Ajax to update items on a page as a result of some type of event. Events in JavaScript can happen as a result of a user action like a click or a mouse over an element, and some are triggered by other events, like when something has finished loading or when a key is released. You can use JavaScript to capture the event when it happens and trigger a series of commands. So first, we're going to clean up our HTML a little bit. We'll take out this Ajax page H1. It's not really doing very much. So let me go ahead and save that. And then I'm going to take my script and wrap it inside a function. So right now, this script is executing whenever it gets to it in the index.html file, which is at the very end. So this page loads, and then this script runs right here. So all this is executing right then. So what we'll do is prevent that from happening by putting everything inside a function. So we'll grab all this code and we'll paste it right there. Let me go ahead and indent that a little bit. And now if I save this and I take a look at my page, you'll notice that nothing is happening because that function is not being called. So one of the ways that we can call a function is by creating a trigger. So I'm going to add a button here, and I'll call this button load. And I'm going to do an on-click event here, and it looks just like an attribute. And then I'll put load Ajax, which will call the function we created in JavaScript. So let me save that, and I'll switch over to the browser, refresh the page. We see the load button, and when we click on it, it should load the text from our file. Of course, there's more events that you can use. For example, you can see if somebody has placed the mouse over the button. So we could do that with a different kind of event here. Sometimes these are called event handlers. So we could do an on mouse over, and I'll save that, refresh our page. Now when I go over this button, it loads the text. So mouse over that button, and there's the text. So something interesting about events is that not all elements on a page can trigger the same types of events. So for example, there's an element called onLoad. So you might be tempted to say something like this: whenever this button finishes loading, then execute the function. So let me save that and see what happens. When I refresh the page, this is not loading, and it really doesn't matter what we do here. That's because the onLoad event doesn't make sense for buttons. It really only makes sense for a page or a body tag. So it's an attribute that can only go in the body tag. So let me save that and come over here. I'll refresh the page, and now you can see that it's kind of doing what it did before. As soon as the page loads, or as soon as the body of the page is finished loading, then it's going to load the text from our file. That's just one thing to keep in mind. Not all elements can trigger any type of event. There's actually a ton of events. This is a really good place to find out about all the different events, when they happen, and what triggers them. So events can be triggered either as attributes like we have done right here, and they can also be triggered directly through JavaScript. So I'm going to take out the onLoad handler here, and I'm going to save this. If I want to trigger this with JavaScript, I'm going to add an ID to my button so I can easily get to it. So I'm going to save this, and I'll switch over to the JavaScript file. And what I'm going to do is create a variable that gets to that button using document.getElementById. And the ID that I want is the load button that we created in HTML. So that puts the button in the myButton variable. And then what I can do is check for a click. So I can say myButton.onClick equals, and then I can execute the function called load Ajax. So I'll save that. And notice a different notation here. I don't need the parentheses in here. So I'll save that, come over here, refresh, load button. And now when I click on the button, it loads my text. So there's a different way to write this, and it doesn't really matter which way you do it, but you'll see it in both ways on the web. So one of the things that you could do to shorten this a little bit is actually create the function as a function literal. So I can get rid of all this right here and just say equals function. And then it'll just execute the function as soon as that mouse is clicked. That's okay if this is the only button that's going to load the list of names for us. If you wanted to use a function that was more generic, you might want to keep it the other way. So let me save this and come over here, refresh, and we click, and there's our text. So events are pretty easy to work with. They can be triggered either through an attribute in the HTML or through an event handler in JavaScript.